I'm ready for public input in just a second.
Okay, I just unmuted us, so any announcement
Super duper.
that you want to make?
Okay, good. I want to welcome everybody to the meeting today. Today's version of technological issues resulted, we had some unstable internet access, but we're up and running now. Andrew is out, Catherine is out, and Ruby is running the Zoom from her office. And so we also did not have access to our normal laptop with the video cable. And so everyone attending today, thank you for taking time to join us. This is going to be the room view that you will get for the meeting, though I'm going to turn around because you don't need to look at me. So we have already convened because we met a quorum, and let's see, did roll call. We are now considering the minutes of the May 8th task force meeting. We had no questions from the task force, we had one. And so after that, we'll open it up to public input. Yeah.
So question is only, and I did not have an opportunity to consult other minutes, but was there not, I believe on the May 8th meeting, an attendance by Supervisor Green? Or did I have, was that
a week later?
That was it was a week,
And I wasn't at the meeting.
a week earlier. Because if it was a week later, we would be,
From May 8th?
I honestly don't remember. I was on Zoom that day, which I guess would have been indicated on the minutes. But anyway, I recall as I was reading through these last night, I was like, wasn't there a meeting where Supervisor Green was in attendance? And if it wasn't one of these, then I'm sorry, I don't want to make an issue of that.
That's okay. We can double check that.
He was definitely there because he said to my right.
Okay.
Do you remember what day?
No, my time is all run together.
So we know it wasn't May 8th because you weren't here.
Was it the May 12th once we get rid of the?
It may have been on one of
Because
the.
it was one, yeah, it was one we could all still do the same.
So
Okay.
in which case it's a.
We're good?
Yeah, if it's not one of these dates, it's not relevant to the conversation about these minutes. So
Okay.
Sorry for raising it that way.
No, it's good to be sure. We'll go ahead and see if there's any public input for the May 8th draft minutes. If so, raise your hand. I am not seeing any, so we'll go ahead and accept a motion.
For that.
Yes, please.
I'll move to the accepted file minutes for the May 8th meeting.
Okay. Second. Good. Thank you, Nora. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0 with 3 absent. Next, June 12th task force meeting minutes. If there are no questions from the task force, we'll go ahead and see if there's any public input on the June 12th meeting minutes.
We have a raised hand. Go ahead, Chuck.
Oh, hi, sorry, this is Holly. We had quite a bit of discussion on whether the consumption lounge discussion was postponed to a future meeting in the 313 and 327 minutes, and it doesn't quite state that, and I was hoping that it could.
Okay, thank you very much. Did we table it on the, on the June 12th?
It would have been in section 4J,
Thank you.
and it also mistakenly says the 17th.
June 12th.
Yeah, so in the June 12th minutes where it says that I was going to verify the recommendations on consumption in the March 13th and 17th minutes, I actually found it in it was in the March 13th minutes where we would have covered it, but we did not. And I was unable to view the actual video to verify, but the minutes do not state that we approved zoning districts for on-site consumption.
No, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say was that it was it says that it was the consumption lounge discussion was going to be postponed to a future meeting.
Well, in the March minutes is what you're saying.
Yes, correct. And so basically the only thing I was saying is that it says noted to verify recommendations on consumption, but I was hoping we could make it clearer that verifying whether the consumption lounge discussion was postponed to a future meeting as stated in the 3:13 and 3:27 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Holly. Anybody else?
Any other questions online or public input? I see no hands raised.
Okay.
Oh, wait, yes. Holly, if you could put your hand down and then the second person who raised their hand who has a phone number as their name could go ahead and speak.
Hi, this is Bart Levinson. I've been trying to get into the meeting since 1 o'clock, and I talked to Kim at CDD. I talked to Carolyn Purdy. So I just wanted to make note that I am only now just getting into the meeting. Previously, I was getting a recording that said the meeting was not yet set up. So how much of the meeting have I missed at this point?
Hey, Bart, you have not missed much at all. We had some technical difficulties, and actually it took us a while just to get to quorum. So we're only at item number 4, considering the minutes from June 12th.
Okay, and what is the quorum?
Today present, we've got Nara Del Baca, Will Weiss, Jan Coppinger, Catherine Vanderwall, and Paul Blues.
Oh,
Oh.
great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll bring it back to the task force for any modifications or motions.
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Will, and all those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, moving on to the June 20th task force minutes. If there are no questions from the task force, we will open it up for public. Are there any hands raised in the Zoom?
Yes, go ahead, Holly.
Oh, hi. I just had a question on section 5 where it says task force member Jennifer Smith spoke on license type 10 storefront retail and further discussion is needed. Was that actually storefront retail with consumption lounge? It said
Nope.
discussion. It was just on storefront retail. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Any further hands in the Zoom?
No further hands.
Then we'll bring it back to the task force for action.
Motion to approve.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes 5-0 to 4. Consideration of permit types required for on-site cannabis consumption. I would recommend that this item be tabled to the next meeting. We have not discussed what zoning districts would allow for cannabis consumption that I could find in the minutes, and I was unable to check the video. But I'm pretty sure we tabled it for a future discussion. And so it would be my recommendation that we move this to our next meeting and include both zoning districts and permit types at the same time. But I will open it up for presentation since Andrew is not here. In this overall spreadsheet that we've been working with, it does recommend here for on-site consumption on retail or on farms in APZ. So that's the agriculture preserve zone, agriculture, timber preserve zone, rural lands, rural residential, suburban reserve, C1, so local commercial, community commercial, service commercial, resort commercial, highway commercial, and then our industrial zones, M1 and MP. And then I think also PDC, so planned development commercial. So what's the will of the task force?
Sorry, just to clarify, your thought here was that we table until next week.
That would be my recommendation, because although this is in the spreadsheet that we've been working on, we've not taken action to approve those zoning districts. And I think that being able to visualize a zoning district that we're talking about will really help us in deciding what level of permit might be required.
You're talking specifically about one that's associated with the type 10, because you're allowed to have on-site consumption without a type 10, as long as as long as the sales aren't happening on site. On-site consumption is allowed pretty much on any private property at this point. If somebody wanted to have an event that was allowing cannabis consumption, I know that the fair could have one right now. They wanted to have one, but because there's a retail ban in Lakeport, they couldn't have a type 10.
So the type 10
we're just
retail,
talking about the consumption associated with the type 10.
we're
retail.
talking about all on-site consumption at a permittee's location,
Okay.
because the board has not discussed on-site consumption at any location yet. And so while there are state regulations that allow for it, like, and it makes sense in the fairgrounds because that's actually a state property and not under jurisdiction of the cities
Mhm.
or the county. Yeah, then those rules are still fine for state areas.
Mhm.
As well as private properties. What we're talking about is linked to, according to
licensee.
this one, a
Okay.
licensee.
Yep, got it. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. What is the will of the task force?
I would, well, you were about to say something, but
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know how we could make good decisions without the other stuff coming first, knowing the districts and all that. So I would agree with putting it off to the later meeting. Approve the zoning district first.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to move it to the next meeting.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any public input on that one?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just gonna second it. All good.
Oh, cool. Okay. Thanks, Jennifer.
And then Holly, go ahead.
I just want to totally support that decision. I think it's great because there's a lot to think about there.
Cool.
Thank you. And then Sarah.
Yeah, I support that and just want to note that we cannot see the zoning chart on Zoom. And I think it would be best to have that discussion when the technology is working so the public can also see the zoning chart.
Good. That's a good thought. Yeah, when Andrew gets back, he'll have that presentation. But that's a good idea. We'll have that pulled up so that people can see what areas of the county we're talking about. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to continue this item to the next meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Where's Ruby? Hey, Ruby, can you hear me? She's running the meeting.
She's in there. Ruby, are you there?
Oh, no, she has a microphone.
She unmuted herself. Oh, hi, Ruby. We can't hear you.
All right, never mind. I forgot my question anyway. Cool. Okay, so moving on to the next item, consideration of permit types required for cannabis events. We have taken action previously, or y'all have, as a task force, and have allowed events in pretty much most of those zones that I just named. So the agriculture preserve, ag, timber preserve, rural lands, rural residential, suburban reserve, local and community commercial, service commercial, resort commercial, highway commercial, both of the industrials, as well as the industrial park and planned development commercial. So we've got like quite a wide span where we've recommended to allow events. Some of these events, and Nara, feel free to jump in. Some of these events were connected or were just standalone locations or connected to permittees. Is that correct, Nara? Like some of them could be larger events, but whereas others were connected to like existing manufacturing locations, and that's why they were in the areas where manufacturing was allowed.
Right. So if a brand wanted to host a community party or something like that, they would still have to get an event license to do that if they plan to have any retail or consumption on site. And then you can have a larger event if, you know, the city of Lakeport would permit the county fair to have a larger, you know, a couple of day long event or something like that, allowing for this in some of these other jurisdiction or some of these other zoning zoning areas would allow for, I know there are some of the local wineries and some of the other local landowners are interested in, you know, possibly having weddings or some other event where they can have on-site consumption or sales or something like that.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about the permit types that are possible. They go from low-level ministerial of our zoning permit to then a conditional use permit. If it were at a zoning permit level, we would have established criteria, requirements, and guidelines, similar to our zoning permit for a special event for a nonprofit. So it wouldn't be like the use permit for an event center, which is continual impact. It would be more like a one-off kind of. And so in that zoning a permit for a special event nonprofit, we take a look at the number of people that are anticipated. We make sure that fire and emergency services are notified, that they have an emergency plan if needed. And so we make sure that all of those criteria are present with that application and that the sign-offs are already there. Different would then be the conditional use permit, which would take a lot more time and require a more robust review by the different agencies, as well as the compilation of draft conditions of approval and a notice to public hearing. So
in order to receive a permit of that type.
correct. In order to receive it, it must be approved by either if it's a minor, then that's the zoning administrator, which is me. Or if it's a major, then the planning commission. So who wants to start the discussion? Yeah.
So with the zoning permit, that was the first one you said.
Mhm.
Is there anything in place that limits, like a certain location can only file for that permit so many times a year?
Good question. Yes. The special event permit only allows 3 events per year at that location.
Okay.
It also limits the hours. And I'm pulling up the zoning ordinance right now, so that I'll have a better answer for you. And so specific to cannabis, since there are regulations at the state level regarding all retailers have their own permits and licenses, and there's other regulations about separation of areas, things like that, that would all then, if the task force, when the task force decides on development and design standards, I'm assuming that would all get thrown into a zoning permit specific to a cannabis event. Let's see.
Right, there are state standards for the event itself, and there are state standards for the event license holder as well. So the person holding and throwing the event would have already gone through the permitting the licensing process at the state level to their background check and a number of other things they would have had to agree to in terms of public safety and following state regulations on keeping the cannabis product safe and locked up. When if like during a multi-day event, I know they've done this at the Emerald Cup, they'll like lock them into a transport container or something like that, or and they're then guarded overnight. But there's a number of security, safety, and other requirements that the state requires that every event licensee has to comply with.
And that is for minor and major use permits, correct?
It's a state thing, so it has nothing. It's the requirement of that licensee, and then they risk forfeiture of their license if they're found to be out of compliance with any of that.
Is that a special license that they get?
It is. It's a license at the state level, and there's varying levels of how many events you're planning to have per year. And then so it's if you're under a certain, it's like between $1,000 and I think $5,000 to apply, and it's really based on if you're going to have one event or two events per year, or you're going to have 12 or 13 events.
To answer Catherine's question about zoning districts where you could get a zoning permit for a special event, it includes everything that we listed except for, it does not include APZ, so the Ag Preserve Zone or the Timber Preserve Zone. It does allow for Ag, RL, RR, SR, C1, C2, C3, then resort commercial, highway commercial, and then the first industrial. It does not include M2 or MP, but it does include PDC. So there are very few where the zoning permit would not be allowed.
So for the zoning permit versus going through the whole planning commission review, with the zoning permit, if something did, because like you said, you notify the fire department, everything, if something was in there and within reason, we went, hey, this is going to be an egress issue, or this is going to be an access issue or something like that. Is it possible to make a recommendation, have it kicked up to a planning commission level? That way we can ensure that there is evacuation plans and everything that get put in place.
That's one route, or alternatively, we could require the fire sign-offs, and you don't sign until adequate safety measures are
Right.
part of the plan.
Okay. Because I don't necessarily have anything against the zoning permit just to make things easier, but
Mhm.
I worry
And a lot
about
quicker.
egress and evacuation and,
Of course.
you know.
I would hope you'd be worried about that.
So that's my only thing is sometimes it's all well and good, and then other times, you know. based off
As
of the
we've seen
area,
with
you know.
previous zoning permits too. Yeah,
Right.
some of them are very well planned out. Others better not come in for that zoning permit the day before their event because they need work.
Mhm.
And particularly because of the security requirements, things like that, you're going to have the egress is going to be important because it's also about protecting the cash in the product and stuff
Right.
like that too. So
And
you
even
want
if they're
to
carrying
protect it,
everything
and you want to be
overnight.
able to get emergency exits.
Exactly.
All right. Are there any questions, comments from the task force? If not, we'll see what hands are raised.
Any hands online? Go ahead, Holly.
Hi there. I just had a question. If there was any way of, what type of events would these be? Would it be sales? Would it be educational? Would it be consumption? Would there be different levels of that? And then secondly, there is ordinance 2947, which outlines wineries, tasting rooms, and associated special events. And they have a criteria that's based on the size of the operation. So would that be something, that could be looked at? So for instance, could there be different types? If it has consumption, one would think it would have a more stringent level than if it was just education or sales, et cetera. And in terms of promoting this, the artisan, type cannabis business, maybe it should be that a type 1 or a type 2 is allowed lesser of a permit, whereas a type 3 type 3 cultivator would have to go through more scrutiny. Anyway, those are just some things I'm posing.
Thank you. Anyone else have the hand up?
Yeah, Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Sarah Bodner. I think that, a way to think about this special event permit for cannabis is like special events for anything else. The county currently has a nonprofit special event permit, and the degree that you have to go through different hoops is based on what you're doing. So if it's just an educational event, there's one set of criteria. If you're going to be serving alcohol, then there's a box you check, and then you have to go through getting the ABC license and everything else. So I'd like to see versatility in this, where there could be different options, and all of those things could be options, but there's more scrutiny and there's more sign-offs by more agencies, depending on if you're going to allow on-site consumption, if you're going to allow sales, and any of those things would still have to happen in accordance with state law. So for example, if there was going to be any retail sales, nobody can just pop up a table and say, we're selling cannabis here. You would have to be a state licensed retailer in order to do so. So there's a lot of additional layers on top of this. I also wanted to speak to something that was brought up at our last task force meeting. I believe the fire chiefs shared that they had developed a permit process for cannabis special events in Kelseyville. And I think that would be a really good place to start this discussion as we get into the details of that permit. If the fire chiefs could share that perhaps at the next meeting, or I guess not today because it would need to be visible to the public in advance, but rather than have duplicative policies in different parts of the county, I think it would be wonderful to see what parameters they created in Kelseyville and see if we could scale those or sync with them, modify them so that it's something that works well for the whole county overall. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Sarah.
And Bart, you're up. Bart, did you still want to speak on this topic?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you so much. I am wondering if it would be helpful to have some sort of number as to number of people that would be attending an event, since the orders of magnitude of what could possibly happen are incredibly different if it's 25 people or if it's 500 people.
Okay,
Thanks,
you.
Bart.
Thank you for that.
And yeah, that's also similarly spelled out in the special event nonprofit permit.
And one more hand, the person labeled guest. You may speak.
Angela. I had a quick question because Maria, you referenced it once, and then I heard Sarah reference it. It said non-profit special events. Are cannabis events considered non-profit even though they're a for-profit company?
Well, the cannabis special event zoning permit would be different. It would have a whole different set of criteria, and so we would not loop it into just the special event nonprofit. Though, just so everyone knows, we have been using the special outdoor event nonprofit, even if it's a for-profit event, so long as it's not a repeated event center, but just like a one-time only. The criteria work.
So will it be like a company like taking the nonprofit event or thing and 2947 and kind of meshing those two together? Is that what the ultimate goal is going to be?
That's kind of dependent on the task force. It would rely on the development standards that we would flesh.
Thank you. And Margot, you're up.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to echo the fire chief's concern about egress and evacuation plans. I think that's very, very important for those who live in the rural areas where there is only one way in and out to a county road, especially when the dirt road that leads out to civilization is less than 20 feet wide. And we have a lot of neighbors who have large agricultural animals to evacuate as well. I would also like to echo Bart's suggestion that we note the size of attendees. And I understand that is probably already part of the special events permit. So kudos that has already been thought of. But the thought of evacuating my small part of the world in Donovan Valley is very disconcerting. If there's a large event going on and neighbors are trying to evacuate large farm animals as well, and flocks of or herds of goats. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Margot.
Tim, your turn to talk.
Hey, to Lynn, migrations. I just want to comment. In favor of the low level permitting. I think that for interest, so for somebody to make the process here, I'd urge you to just please follow as closely as you can the state rules on special events. These are being held all the time. And then I believe it was Holly who mentioned what kind of events look at all types of events, I think should be allowed. We should definitely consider them. Obviously, consider fire, safety, etc. And then I also wanted to throw in really quickly, there's a bill going through the state legislature right now, AB 1111, which would allow, excuse me, small cultivators to sell product directly as retailers. So this would be a great opportunity to allow some of the Lake County cultivators to sell their own product directly to consumers at these events.
Thanks, Bill. Hey, for the minutes,
Tim.
Tim, sorry. That was Tim. Yeah. For the minutes, could you state your first and last name, please?
It's Tim Moreland.
Tim Moreland. My last name spelled Morland, and I'm on behalf of High Grade Solutions.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Jennifer, you're up.
I think that I'd like to point out that's important to note here and alleviate some concerns is that just because the word cannabis is in front of the term special event does not mean that there are different elements that aren't going to be checked. So anything that would be part of the county issuing any regular special event permit, whether that be capacity, ingress, egress, licensed alcohol sales versus licensed cannabis sales, all of those rules still apply. And then we add the more stringent state level rules as well, and anything we develop in the development standards. So a lot of the framework is done and will be followed. And we don't really need to recreate the wheel. We just need to add the additional regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And then Bart, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Also, it seems to me that there needs to be some sort of specific numbers put to when the number of people make an everyday occurrence become an event that hasn't been applied for. Like, I would think that there needs to be some basic understanding of if 50 people show up, but no event has been applied for, but because there are on-site sales, what about that?
So it's my understanding, thanks, Bart. It's my understanding that there is a definition of an event. So it's not just people getting together, because you can't, it requires an actual license from the state, and then the retailers, like the whole thing has to be approved ahead of time. So if you had a group of people collecting that, it would not be okay to all of a sudden have spontaneous retailers there selling.
The state requires you to have a list of every participating licensee filed with the state.
Yeah.
Beforehand.
But
Yeah.
where is that information? Where can we access it and see it? And wouldn't it be important for everyone in the task force to be seeing that information?
Sure, that's at the state cannabis
Cannabis.ca.gov.
has those regulations, but those are also something like right now we're not hashing out the development standards. We're just working through the permit level, and then when we start working on design and development standards, that's when we're going to be pulling in all that information so that everybody has access to it. Okay, any other hands?
Yes. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. This is Sarah Bodner. I think one thing LCCA could offer to do for the next discussion when we get into development standards is provide the information about state law regarding cannabis special events. I did this regarding on-site consumption, which was submitted as part of the agenda for today, and I know we're going to push that forward, but Nara and I could certainly pull together to just add a little bit more detail to how the state limits events. And one of the ways in which the state limits events is by saying they can only happen a certain number of times a year if you are a licensed cannabis event organizer. And that's the name of the license at the state level to host a cannabis event is an event organizer license. And you have to get that license from the state before you can apply for a local event. That's the prerequisite. And then as a cannabis event organizer, you could not host something every day, a daily event or even a weekly event. It would not comply with the state rules. So I think that background would be helpful as we move into development standards, and Nara and I could certainly provide that documentation and submit it for the next meeting.
Thank you, Sarah.
Any other hands? I see none.
All right. Bringing it back to the task force. Go ahead, Will.
So I'm curious, Paul, if you'd be able to summarize in just a minute or two what the Kelseyville program is looking like, if we're all going to be potentially hearing about it or mirroring that as was suggested a minute ago.
Yeah, so essentially for us is it's annual permits, which we're allowed to charge per the fire code. And ours are pretty simple. And we've actually, it's funny because they talked about mirroring it. We've actually already mirrored with Lake County Fire. So Lake County Fire's permits are the same as ours. And we're pretty much the only two departments as of right now that are really doing anything or proactive in it. So when it comes down to the fire department level, the fire departments that are playing, I guess you could say, are the ones that are already mirrored together. And ours are annual permits. So it's a one-time fee and it gets you everything for the year. It's not anything outrageous. It's not thousands of dollars, depending on the event type and how many people you anticipate at the event. It's anywhere from, I don't want to quote exactly off the top of my head, like $100 all the way up to like $250, $300. And that'll allow you to run as many events from the fire department perspective. I get that there's state regulations, county regulations and everything on that level. But you could run as many events as you wanted for that year off of that $100.
So like a point of order question, if I were to get a permit through the fire department and then seek to, pursue the either the zoning permit level or something more strenuous that would require planning commission approval, would, for example, that's more stringent set with the planning commission, would the sign off from the fire department be assumed if I had already gone through your office to get this permit for?
So we would generate a receipt for you. Yeah. And that receipt would be good for the year. Right.
And it would constitute approval for the planning commission's purposes that we were just sort of talking about as the top tier for clearance on this.
On the application, there would be a sign off from the fire department that their requirements have been met.
And for us, it goes back to that whole, we're just coming out and it's just showing that you came and talked to us. You're letting us know that you're hosting an event. And then we're going to come out and go, yep, they've got egress, exit doors aren't blocked, all that kind of stuff, and all the safety precautions. They've got extinguishers. If it is something that's going to go outside, that they've got extinguishers in place to hold for the capacity of the event and everything along those lines, just making sure that they're up with the fire code.
So your annual permit then is location specific though, right? Okay. So if somebody had up to 3 events per year, or if they wanted to do multiple events, we would still need a permit for each event because we want to make sure that the safety and health standards.
The state also
are
requires
ensured.
one for every event.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would still come and sign off with us, but as far as fees, it would be that one fee.
Sure.
And then you would get those 3 events based off of the state standards
In that location.
annually.
And when you guys make a location by location evaluation, occupancy is a factor that is considered. Okay. So like, this is not purely my own curiosity.
It's all good.
Curiosity bounced off of what we've been hearing on Zoom, right? But I guess I'm wanting to make sure that the capacity of such events or such spaces, if you will, is part of the evaluation that the fire department is already making.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So they couldn't have a room this big, for example, which for people on Zoom, it looks like it's 15 by 20 feet roughly. You wouldn't be able to say, hey, we're going to have 200 people in here. You know what I mean? We're going to come and say, no, we'll take our measurements. This is the max amount of people. If you have an outdoor area associated with it, now that number kind of changes, because you can have so many people outdoor versus indoor. But yeah, there will be that capacity regulation that's set on it as well. You can only have so many people in here due to egress, and that's all laid forth in the fire code too, is what the max occupancy is.
Right.
And the state requires you to designate the sales area, where sales is going to be, area where consumption is going to be, and the state has to have all that filed, and it has to be patrolled and enforced as well at the event. If anyone's ever been to the Emerald Cup, it's interesting because you're not supposed to have cannabis and alcohol at the same things. They actually have this like beer garden is like walled off, and you have to put your cannabis out before you go in there. You can't take your alcohol out of there because they don't want the 2 things crossing over. So just to put something forward, these are temporary events. And I think that if the planning commission is considering something, I think that's a land use based, more permanent permitting solution that they're looking for, and more permanent approval that they're looking to do. I think that if we're talking about a single day event, it makes a lot of sense to mirror what the county already has, which is a pretty robust checklist, and something that's ministerial, because it's only going to happen once. And I don't think it's a good use of the planning commission's time or staff's time to have to prepare an entire staff report for a 1 to 4 day event at the max.
Additionally, zoning permits are considered ministerial. So according to California Environmental Quality Act, ministerial permits do not require exemptions, initial studies, none of that. And so that's why they do go a lot faster. So if we bumped it up to planning commission review, we'd have to take a look then at CEQA to see if we have any exemptions. So it could then result in an initial study, which is another 4 to 6 months of processing time
And cost.
and cost. Okay, so we've brought it back to the task force. Does the task force have any recommendations?
I actually had one question just for my own personal clarification.
Yeah.
For these special events, these special cannabis events, could I get a little bit more of an idea of what I'm just trying to picture in my mind? I'm not exactly picturing like bounce houses, and stuff.
21.
Okay. And then the only reason why I was asking is I was looking back at 6 for on-site cannabis consumption. Is that all going to be something that coincides with these special events, or will a special event they're not allowed to do on-site consumption as well?
Generally, special events will have some component of on-site consumption. Not everyone does. Some of them just have sales. Otherwise, it can be an educational event. You don't even need to get licensed for that, right? But nobody can bring product on site.
Okay.
So, but yeah, there's generally a designated, like the biggest one, right? I keep going back to the Emerald Cup, but that's because it's nearby and it's long established and it's enormous. It's a huge event. There's consumption allowed in the entire fairgrounds, except for in the beer garden. And there are certain designated areas where there's music being played, but there's not sales happening, in the music tent. There's food areas, and then there's designated cannabis sales areas. But yeah, there's consumption happening all over the fairground pretty much.
Okay. And then for
During those few days.
the state level, because you kept saying 3 events, is that 3 events where there's consumption occurring, or is it just 3 events period, whether it's educational or not?
I assume that an educational event, since you're not going to have to get a state license or you're not going to be selling or consume or there may be consumption a lot if it's a private thing and it's not associated with any licensee is the deal. So if it's a bring your own cannabis and a private event with education, then I that probably wouldn't apply to that count, because this is a state licensed event holder holding one of their events, and they can have I'm just pulled up their license fees at the state. So you can sign it, you can have a 5 or fewer event license, you can have a 6 to 10 event license, 11 to 20 or more than 20. And the license fees increase with the number of events. So the more than 20 event license fee is $20,000 at the state level. So I'd imagine most folks around here, if we're looking at small things, would be doing the 5 or fewer, which is $1,000 application fee and a $3,000 license fee. But they wouldn't be able to have all 5 at the same location. Those are limited at this point to 3 events at the same location per year, because what they're trying to do is prevent, I think, unfair competition from retailers or for retailers, where suddenly there's like a pop-up weekly event across the street from a local retailer, right? And that's cutting into their sales.
Okay.
And then likewise, the county zoning permit.
Like a de facto retailer.
3 events per year.
Yep, at that location.
Right.
But from the county's point of view, it's not so much a competition thing, it's a land use impact thing. And so we up it if it's more towards an event center and less just a few temporary events.
So like hypothetically, if an operator with a license had 3 different farm sites or 3 different event spaces where they would not farm, not, that would be too specific, but 3 different spaces where they wanted to do this, could they then host up to 9 events per year?
Yes. According to depending on the development standards.
Sure.
But let's say they were just getting a special event, as it's stated now, it's up to 3 events at that location.
At each location.
Right,
At each
so,
location that has a zoning permit, yeah.
Okay.
so an event holder that had 6 to 10 could have 3 at each location over in the county if they wanted to be a
Yes.
Lake County event person.
Yes.
And the special permit, can I speak?
Sure.
Okay. The special event permit that we have now that allows 3 events at the same location, do they still have to get permitted for each one of those 3 events? Or as long as they're the same, basically the same event, that one permit covers all 3 instances?
As long as the project description would be similar for each event, they get approved for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All 3, but the
Let's
state
say
would
they
require you
changed
to
it,
have a
though.
license for each.
Yeah. If it was significantly different, then that could be an issue. I don't know that the county would be following them around.
Right.
But sometimes then that's when we start getting complaints. And if you're not operating according to what was approved, then we have a problem.
Mhm.
All right. Anybody else? We've had the pretty robust discussion when we brought it back to the task force. So let's just double check and see if there's any hands raised in Zoom.
Any more comments from our audience on Zoom? No hands.
All right. So we're still bringing it back to the task force for action.
For action or direction, what are we doing here?
We would be developing a recommendation through motion and action by the task force.
And we're deciding whether to go ministerial or not.
This is, yes, we've already decided the zoning, the zoning districts. So this is strictly for level of permit types. Would you want to keep it all at zoning permit level? Are there some zoning districts that you would think appropriate for the discretionary or use permit process? And if so, at what level? I would also, yeah, that's fine. I'm not including, or I don't think that the event organizer is included because that has no land use impact. And our zoning ordinance is all about land use impact. However, the requirement that the event organizers furnish their license with their application would be easy to require.
And the state requires that event organizer to apply for the temporary cannabis event license at least 60 calendar days before the first day of the temporary cannabis event.
That's a really good idea. That's a development standard, but I would highly recommend we mirror that because sometimes these emergency plans, I mean, you can't really build them on the fly. So depending on the size of the event, to make sure that that person had their best chance of actually getting to pull the event off and getting that permit approved, then yeah, that leeway is very helpful. Particularly if it's during the summer when we don't have fire guys around very often, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Does the current special event zoning permit process have a cap on number of people, attendees?
we'll see, that's a very interesting question. And we're going to need to talk about that when we do development standards because special events in the definitions is over 500 people. And I'm pretty sure we're not going to do that same type of definition for a cannabis event. And so I was looking, there's somewhere it says if there's over 200, then you need your safety plan. But we'll figure that out because we want to make sure we're mirroring the state and the fire and also Office of Emergency Services, the Sheriff's Department, that they have their concerns addressed as well.
Could that be the threshold though? So
It could be
you
whatever
say anything up
threshold.
to a special event would include all the way up to 500 people, since you just threw out that number, and anything over 500 would require there to be a full planning commission review.
That is up to the recommendation of the task force and approval of the board.
What would be the sort of counter argument to that? Because that sounds pretty logical.
I don't know, but that's a development standard too. So
Yeah.
we're getting a little off of our agenda item. We're just talking about permit types.
So it would be length of time to get a hearing. I think sometimes there's a long delay to get a hearing and we have 60 days, but sometimes it can take 4 to 6 months to get a planning commission date. or longer.
Longer, depending on what level of
Much longer.
environmental review. Yeah.
And again, it's just for that single day, even if it is 500. I think if we did discuss this in the development standards, and I think it absolutely makes sense for there to be additional development standards for anything over 500 people.
Mhm.
That's a lot of people in a county of 65,000.
Right, but there are some
Yeah.
locations where, well, not that many off the top of my mind, but
But if
yeah,
you-
fairgrounds, which then
Yeah,
we don't have to worry about, but yeah.
if you were anticipating having that many, I mean, you keep talking about the Emerald Cup, right?
Mhm.
When I'm assuming based off of what you've been telling me, they probably start getting somewhere in the vicinity of that many people.
Oh,
I doubt that's something you
It's
plan.
much more. Yeah.
I doubt that's something you plan 60 days in advance. I mean, that's something you probably start planning out.
A year or two.
Right, but that's
Maybe
also
more
on a
than that.
fairgrounds.
Right.
So that's not, they're not coordinating with county personnel. They're talking to the state on that one.
And the
Right.
city of Santa Rosa. So there's
Right.
planning with that, and like the fairgrounds here would have to plan with Lakeport Police Department and
CHP.
and
They do
CHP,
the-
North
yeah.
Fire, like those kinds of things, just to you don't want to do it without your emergency services, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
go around them and then
Right.
have them find out. But there are pretty so the security requirements for a temporary cannabis event must hire or contract for security personnel to provide security services at the licensed temporary cannabis event. They must be at least 21 years of age, licensed by the Bureau of Security and Investigative Services, and comply with chapters 11.4 and 11.5, Division 3 of the Business and Professions Code. And they have to be present on the licensed premises at all times that the cannabis goods are available for sale or consumption.
Okay.
So that would hopefully help with our local law enforcement folks.
But I do think that the number of people anticipated to attend will definitely have to be addressed in the development standards, because I know it would be addressed by fire guys as well as sheriff.
Yeah.
There's just got to be a magic tipping number where,
Yeah.
anything under 500 people feasible to plan out within 60 days. Anything over 500, like I'm going to need more time.
Yeah.
There's got to be a number somewhere
Well,
in
there
there.
could be even
or
it's 180 days for a 500 person event. I mean, you hope
Yeah.
that they're planning, that's a lot, that's a big event for anyone to put together in 2 months. So you'd hope that they'd be doing their work a little bit beforehand. And that could also all be part of that ministerial checklist too.
Right.
I mean, I think, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think Bart's point about sort of like the level of severity of what could go wrong is of course proportional to the number of people in attendance. And so that's why I cling to this as a detail that matters. I don't mean to say that it can't be addressed in development standards, but I really do think it's, if what we're supposed to do right now is draw the lines and then color them in later with development standards, like we have to draw the lines based on those numbers as well. Like that, it can't only be the coloring, it has to be the lines on the page. So, I mean, so, I mean, again, I don't mean to only put this in your box, Paul, but, and I don't mean to actually take it from anyone else in the discussion, but like from a theory standpoint, when you're thinking about public safety, what is that number? Like when do you guys start to thinking like, whoa, the number of human beings means this number of cars means this number of people on the road at any given moment if you had to I mean, like just, can you talk us through that logic at all?
It's a fluid question.
Like,
because
how do you do the
starts-
Pear Festival, right?
Right. And that's the thing. And that goes through a full planning commission review, the Pear Festival, I'm pretty sure. It doesn't? Oh, okay. Because that one, for me, when I start looking at it, it's where's it going to be planned at? What is there 2 ways in? Is there 1 way in? Is there 4 ways out? How many different roads are available for people to get out? And then, yeah, absolutely, the anticipated number of people, because if it's a small event and they're only anticipating 100 people in throughout the whole day and it's on Main Street, yeah, it's going to cause an impact. There's probably going to be a few busy times where there's congestion, and traffic congestion, but it's not going to be any sort of great impact. But yeah, you start getting down to the Pear Festival and you get to something on that scale and it completely changes where all of our apparatus even goes for the day. It all gets moved to the back of the station because you're not going to get out the front of the station, So it really, it's kind of a fluid number. Yeah. On how that's all approached. I'd like to say that and that's why I was asking, I'd like to say that there's an easy number, but once again, something happening on Soda Bay, you can go east or west, you can't go anywhere else. Something happening on, trying to think of a better place to think. Highland Springs Road, but Highland Springs Road and 29, not that there would ever be anything there, but you could go out on 29 towards Lakeport. You could go 29 towards Kelseyville, Highland Springs Road towards Lakeport, Highland Springs Road out towards the reservoir and back around through. It all kind of just depends on where this area is. Something off of Diener that's a 1-lane dirt road might be handled completely differently than, something out on Gaddy Lane.
Or just
So-
outright refused.
Right.
If the project or the proposed location is not able to meet the health and safety standards, then it's not going to get sign offs
Yeah.
from
Right.
They
fire.
might say, no, you're limited to X number of people,
Right.
cars, or,
Right.
attendees or whatever.
Right.
I thought I saw that
There
the other
isn't-
chiefs had their hands up
That's
too.
There's
kinda why I was
there
asking
were
about,
two
picking
hands.
Up to a full community plan or planning commission review was
But it-
based off of if there is, and Diener's like one that comes to mind. Not that I can see many special events happening on Diener, but something like that happens there and it's an immediate red flag for me. We're gonna have how many people out on Diener and it's a single lane dirt road, port access, high fire
Also,
hazard
keep
severity
in
zone. Can
mind,
you put this
instead
up?
of just raising the permit level, if the fire people denied it, planning denies it, and then that person has the due process ability to appeal it to the planning commission.
Mhm.
So I'm not
So you end
sure.
up with a hearing.
Yeah, let's say
Yeah.
somebody wants to do it on Diener with 1,000 people and you're like, there's no way, you're not going to sign it. We're not going to sign it. It's not going to happen. They can appeal it, but I don't know if just saying, heck no, that's not going to work. You need a use permit. I don't know how that would help
Yeah.
the situation because it's not like they're going to widen the road or build parking. And it doesn't make any sense to then create those as a list of conditions for a temporary event either.
That you could have 3 times a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that there are still a lot of ways to, just because it's ministerial doesn't mean it's absolutely guaranteed.
Right.
So if it doesn't meet the health and safety criteria that would get into those development standards, it's not going to get signed off.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I really do think that we can handle that, working with you all, working with planning and figuring out what's best for health and safety. I mean, that matters to the cannabis industry as well. We don't want the headlines either.
Right.
Right. So,
Right.
but I do think that can be handled with this in discussion with the fire chiefs, that we may not have waiting and paying for a use permit, right, is maybe excessive, and we may be able to handle that with
Right.
again, because it's just one day or for up to 4 days, but you still have to get a permit for every day of it at the state level. So
Right.
at that point, you would have hit your 3. So it sounds like we probably would have a 3-day limit in Lake County for multiple day events. I see the chiefs and a couple other folks have their hands up.
Go ahead. Aaron,
Other chiefs.
Aaron, are you still there? Would you like to speak?
I am. I don't know if sometimes this robot's a little bit. Is that okay? Can you hear it okay?
Yes.
Okay. I raised my hand before actually this last few sentences of the conversation, but it sounds like a lot of it will be worked out in the development standards because so many things have their own internal shutoffs, just a capacity. If you had something at, the Brick Hall, it has an internal capacity of how many people can be there and things like that. And to add to just helping conceptualize the event license in general. So Nara talked about the Emerald Cup, which is a great example of an event that's been going on for a long time and has an event license, so there can be consumption. Another example is there's the Hog Farm Hideaway every year at Black Oak Ranch in north of Laytonville. And somebody got an event license just to have a section of that, almost like a beer garden, but like a cannabis garden, to have sales and consumption in that area. So that's another way that it can be. So it really actually does fit in with existing event ordinances and guidelines. So very long-winded way of saying sounds like you guys are working out in the development standards and already on that path of existing regulations. Thank you guys for all you're doing.
Thank you, Erin. Bart?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. I'd like to speak to a project that's just been permitted at the Planning Commission, Bar X, right outside of Middletown. It's on Highway 29. It is between the downtown of Middletown and then a number of public schools, and then the Bar X on the way to Hidden Valley. It is the major corridor for evacuations and for the use of first responders. The Bar X Ranch, I believe, is either 59 or 79 acres. It's a very wonderful, gracious property with that's already been used as a B&B. There are multiple buildings. So it's easy to imagine events being desired here, and they already know that they're so big, they're going to need a turnoff lane by Caltrans. However, their application didn't take into account what could happen in the event of a fire when the evacuation route is in use, and it is the driveway to the site itself. So I really do think that there needs to be very specific caps named so that all can see and get an idea of, if it's this many, you have to do this. If it's that many, you have to do that. And I really want to invite people to drive by the Bar X. There are no there are no shoulders there. There's steep rock hills on both sides of the road, and if that were at the time of Valley Fire, that would have been absolutely a death trap.
Thanks, Bart.
Thanks, Bart. Chief, you've taken your hand up and down. Did you still want to speak?
No, I was just going to add a little bit to what Paul said, so for us to prepare for an event like that, we look at location, definitely means of ingress and egress, the time of year that it is. Do they have on-site first aid? Do we have access throughout the entire event so that if we have to have an ATV, or how do we get access to it? So, we predominantly put an operational plan together, do a site visit. So there is a fair amount of planning on our site, because if we have a big event that's in the summertime, heat related, is that there's a potential for a higher call volume. So we'll staff up with another medic unit, maybe another person on an engine. So there's a fair amount of planning on our side. Like Paul was saying, the bigger the event, the more planning we have to do, and just kind of make sure that all the boxes are checked. And the number one thing is that of life safety of our continuity of operation, as well as supporting the event.
Thank you. And guest, you may speak.
Thank you. And I think Chief Cepeda just touched on it, but just for clarification, ask and Paul, when you guys do your applications, do you guys take into consideration how many applications, or how many, I guess they only apply for it once with you guys. So you guys don't look at how many there are in a certain district at one given time on a weekend, or if you guys are going to be spread thin?
I keep a calendar of everything, so I have an idea of what's going on, which weekends, but I'm racking my brain. I don't think I've ever had a conflict.
Okay, thank you.
Same here, we have the events for 4th of July here with the city, so we're always keeping a calendar, and if they do overlap, then it's going to have to coordinate with the second application to try to mitigate whatever issues there might be in a conflict.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I had.
For like an on-site
All right.
tent during the hot. So this is all development standard stuff. So
Back to task force.
So you want a motion?
Yeah, I'd like one.
I'll make a motion to keep it at the zoning level,
Okay.
with fire department sign-offs required,
Amongst others.
amongst others.
Yeah.
Yes, but
How about with
Amongst others.
appropriate agency
With-
sign-offs?
that works.
Okay.
I'll second. Oh.
you go. Doesn't always have to be the cannabis person.
Okay, first motion, and then Catherine second.
And then we're gonna explore development standards after that, correct?
Oh, yeah. I have a feeling this is going to be a big zoning or development standard topic.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have it as the motion was zoning permit with appropriate agency sign-offs. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0-4. Are there any public comments or anyone in the public wanting to comment about something that is under the purview of the Cannabis Task Force meeting, but was not covered in today's agenda?
I see no hands.
All right. No comments. We will then go ahead and adjourn our meeting at 2:21. Thank you, everybody, for taking time to join us today. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from now. Same time, same bat channel.